Yet once again Russia switched the main goal of its so-called special military operation. It used to be the liberation of Donbas region, which is on the east of Ukraine, prevention of World War III, protection of Russian Ukrainians, and now it's just blatantly the occupation of Ukrainian territories. What's up, investors and people of Reddit, it's the Russian Dude, and this is your daily update on Russian-Ukrainian war as of Monday, April 25th. You can see the main events of the day to my right, along with the timestamps. It has been reported that Russia yet once again changed the main purpose of this so-called military operation, and now in addition to liberating the east of Ukraine, Russia will also attempt to liberate the south of Ukraine. And whenever these rumors reached the press secretary of Russia, Dmitry Peskov, he said that he has no authority to discuss these questions, therefore they should all be forwarded to the Ministry of Defense of Russia. And indeed, there were several reports of bombings on the south of the country, specifically the city of Odessa. And according to some war experts, the main reason why would Russia want to add the south of Ukraine to be a part of this military operation, it is because Putin wants to present some kind of victory before the victory parade, which will happen May 9th in Moscow. For those of you who might not know, every single year since 1945 there is a victory parade in Russia, Moscow. And this parade celebrates the victory over Nazi Germany during the Second World War. And so yet once again Putin wants to present some kind of victory over alleged Ukrainian Nazis so that this parade, which will happen in a couple of weeks, will be justified. And the reason why would the south of Ukraine is added to be a part of this military operation, it is because Ukrainians are protecting themselves so good in the east of Ukraine, making it almost impossible for Russians to advance. So basically Putin is trying to look for something easy to capture. And it is also estimated that in the worst case scenario, in case south of Ukraine won't budge as well, Putin might use some radical methods. And among these radical methods is the use of chemical or even worse, nuclear weapons. And I mean, it looks like at this point he just wants to present some kind of victory to his people. And yes, indeed, on this map which is presented to us by the Defense Intelligence of the United Kingdom, we can see that the main military action is indeed concentrated on the east of Ukraine and south of Ukraine. And by the way, if you want to see more details, feel free to pause the video. And just recently, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine mentioned that Russia is almost ready with concentration of its main forces in these two regions. And according to them, Russia is getting ready for this one final big push. All these events led to Financial Times writing an article that Putin is no longer looking for a peaceful resolution of the conflict, and that his main goal from now on is simply and blatantly occupying the territories of Ukraine. And by the way, if you like this style of daily news reporting, feel free to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also, I will be donating all of my Patreon memberships at the end of each month to Ukraine, and I'll do it during charitable live stream, which will happen this Saturday, April 30th. And if you want to be a part of this group donation, make sure to check the link in the description. The city of Odessa on the south of Ukraine, which previously avoided much of the war action, was under a missile strike last week. It is reported that there were 4 missile strikes using caliber missiles, and at least one of these missiles hit the civilian building. Around 10 days ago, Ukraine has sunk a Russian Navy flagship called Moskva. But according to Russian side, some Russian sailor forgot to put out his cigarette, which started the fire, which eventually sunk the ship. And so recently, Russia decided to salvage what's left of ship, including some missiles. With the only one problem is that for this operation, Russia will be using the ship which is 110 years old. Just quick couple of facts about this salvage ship Kommuna. It was built while Russia was still under the rule of its last Tsar, Nikolai II, and the first time the ship touched the water was the next year after the Titanic sank in 1912. And this is how this ship looks at this very moment. In his interview to a very pro-Russian media, Russian Today, this veteran Italian journalist said that Zelensky is the only one obstacle towards peace in Ukraine. And I mean, if this is the type of analysis and journalism he presents, it is no wonder he is an unnamed veteran Italian journalist who gives interviews to Russia Today. One of the hottest combat zones on the territory of Ukraine since the beginning of this war was the city of Mariupol, which is located in the southeast of the country. It is worth mentioning that the steel factory called Azovstal is located inside this city, and according to Russian side, this is the location of the main nationalistic battalion of Ukraine called Azov. For this reason, at this very moment, Mariupol is one of the most destroyed cities in the entire Ukraine. And for the last month, Russia was trying to breach the security of Azovstal factory. The entire city of Mariupol was technically occupied by Russian forces except this factory. And just when Russians were supposed to allegedly make the final push, the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, cancel the order. According to him, the cancellation of this assault, it is because of complex underground tunnel systems, which basically means it will be very hard to liberate this factory from Nazis and Russia might suffer big losses. In addition to that, the capture of this factory might not be as good from logistical perspective as it used to be. In response to that, the advisor to the president of Ukraine, Alexei Arestovich, mentioned that the real reason why Putin cancelled this assault, it is because simply Russians cannot take this factory. He said that Russians already suffered significant losses trying to capture it. Besides that, Azov Battalion received significant reinforcements during the last couple of weeks, and in the meantime, Russian army was mainly relocating to the north of the country. The next thing Alexei Arestovich mentioned is that now, since there is fewer Russian soldiers in the territory of Mariupol, it will be way easier for Ukrainian forces to engage in counterattacks. Which basically means, I assume, that in the nearest future we can see the liberation of Mariupol by Ukrainian army. Arestovich concluded that if Russia really wanted to capture this factory, they should have brought 2-3 times more soldiers. And another potential reason why Putin revoked his soldiers from Mariupol is because Russia got scared of Ukrainian ultimatum. And just as a reminder, this ultimatum was given by Zelensky that in case Russia continues to kill Ukrainians in Mariupol, Ukraine will never negotiate with Russia. For the very first time since the beginning of this war, Russia unofficially recognized the number of its losses. During the briefing of the Ministry of Defense of Russia, they announced that the losses are 13,414 soldiers and more than 7,000 are still missing. And those 7,000 missing, with 99% probability, are also dead. So whenever we sum up these two numbers, it gets us pretty close to the official numbers of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. In addition to that, the Ministry of Defense of Russia also announced the official losses of the flagship of Russian Navy, Moskva. According to them, only one person died, 27 people are missing, and the rest 396 sailors were rescued. They also mentioned that these 396 soldiers cannot wait to be back at war. And I mean, it's pretty hard to find one person who cannot get back to war, let alone whenever you're speaking about every single one of them wanting to go back. Around 84% of Ukrainians think that regular Russians are also responsible for this war, and only 4% of Ukrainians think that Russians cannot be blamed for the actions of its government. Around 2 AM this morning, these oil storages in the Russian city of Berdyansk were caught on fire. It is assumed that the explosion was the result of a drone strike. And as always, there are many speculations whether there are Ukrainians or Russians who stay behind this attack. The position of those who think that these were Ukrainians is quite understandable, and is pretty much straight to the point. Ukrainians are attacking important infrastructure objects, but at the same time, some people think that these were Russians who attacked their own territories. And their main point in this case is that Russians did this so that they can blame Ukrainians, so that Russians can justify its further invasion into Ukraine. This Sunday, the presidential elections in France ended, and the winner is current president of France, Emmanuel Macron. It is also worth mentioning that he is the first president to be re-elected in the last 20 years. His main challenger was Marine Le Pen, who got approximately 42% of votes. And during my several last videos, I was assuming that she was somehow connected to Russia, mainly because of her statements indirectly supporting Russia in this war, acknowledging Crimea as a part of Russian territory, and wanting France to leave NATO in case she wins the presidency. The main oppositioner of Russia, Alexei Navalny, also mentioned that he thinks that she might be connected to Russia last week. And during one of the last presidential debates in France, Emmanuel Macron also acknowledged that Marine Le Pen might be a Russian marionette. Soon after the beginning of this war, Visa and Mastercard announced that they'll be leaving Russian market, which basically means that all the cards issued inside Russia will no longer work outside of Russia, and those cards issued outside of Russia will no longer work inside the country. Because of this, some Russians started going to neighboring countries to open new bank accounts so that they can continue using money online. But international banks quickly recognized it and started limiting these opportunities. For example, Russians who arrived to Armenia to open new bank accounts can no longer do it as easy. In order for a Russian to open a new bank account in Armenia, he or she must have one of these things, which are either Armenian residency, business, property, or a job. Or the very least Armenian banks expect Russians to show is the rental agreement for some kind of property for several months months ahead. And I mean, it's not the very first time Russians are having difficulties with opening bank accounts outside of Russia. The Russian parliament now also estimates that it will be close to impossible for any Russian to get any visas or Mastercards in the nearest future. A couple of weeks ago, Finland, along with Sweden, announced its intent to join NATO. And just several days ago, the parliament of Finland voted for the country joining the alliance. And so, since now we're speaking about NATO, the advisor to the president of Ukraine, Alexei Arestovich, mentioned that Ukraine is no longer asking the alliance to close the airspace above the country. And I mean, previously Zelensky was also talking about the unwillingness of the alliance to show the real support to Ukraine. It is now that Alexei Arestovich makes it more official. Arestovich also added that okay, if NATO doesn't want to close the airspace above the country, at least send us some anti-aircraft defense systems. So it basically looks something like this. Okay, so you don't want to protect us, at least give us some weapons so we can protect ourselves. Last week, the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, had a big press conference, and these are the main statements that he made. First of all, he mentioned that Ukraine expects 100% support from the United Nations. Second, he said that Ukrainian army is very thankful for tanks which Russian army abandoned on the battlefields. Third, President Zelensky mentioned that he does not care what Russia thinks about Western countries sending weapons to Ukraine. Fourth is that all the territories that are occupied or taken away by Russian army will eventually be returned and liberated by Ukrainians. And I think that whenever he speaks about liberation, he means the real liberation in this case. The next thing Zelensky mentioned is that Ukraine on the path to have the greatest army in the world, and that for as long as Ukraine has access to enough weapons, it will be able to resist Russia and take back its own territories. Zelensky then concluded that Russia switched from giving out ultimatums to now making agreements. Some Russian government officials signed an order under which they want to recognize the United States of America as the main unfriendly country towards Russia. The Minister of Economics of Ukraine, Yulia Sviridenko, thinks that Ukraine will join the European Union somewhere in 2024. And just as a reminder, Ukraine submitted its application documents to the Union last week. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin have met with President of Ukraine Zelensky. This was the highest US government official visit to Ukraine since the beginning of this war. The main topic of discussion was obviously the situation in Ukraine, and some preliminary agreements about sending weapons to Ukraine were made. The Federal Security Service of Russia reported that they prevented the assassination attempt against Vladimir Solovyev, who is the main propagandist of Russia. This so-called assassination attempt was planned by obviously Ukrainian Nazis who are living in Moscow, and the Federal Security Service even released the video of capturing these alleged Ukrainian Nazis, which by the way I'm not sure if I can show on YouTube because it has so many swastikas and other prohibited symbols, but I'm sure that you can easily find it on the internet. Many people on the internet think that this capture was staged because it was just too perfect. The alleged Nazis that they captured were just like the Nazis that you see in the movies. They had Hitler books all over the place, swastikas on the floor, Nazi tattoos, their heads were shaven, they had weapons, basically exactly what you imagine. And whenever they were being captured, they were not resisting at all. And later, during the interrogation, they confirmed everything. Some people even claimed that the tattoos were simply painted with a Sharpie, and there were even some notebooks with some Russian words and sentences. And I mean, which Ukrainian Nazi would write in Russian, right? But anyways, whenever this propagandist Vladimir Solovyev learned that there was an assassination attempt against himself, he said that the only one person who would order such an attempt was no one else than President of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky. It is also worth mentioning that previously Solovyev was threatening Ukraine by any means possible. He said that Russia will have no problems using the weapons of mass destruction against this country. He even said that just give him a weapon and he will go to this war himself. But whenever this alleged assassination attempt was made, which most likely is not even real, the next day Vladimir Solovyev was spotted with many bodyguards. So basically you get the idea. It is so easy for such people to threat the others with the words, but as soon as there is some minor counteractions, they just run for their lives. Thank you so much for your attention, stay safe and see you tomorrow.